Welcome to Men, Sex, and Tantra.
Discover what your parents, porn, and religion never taught you about being a man and having extraordinary sex. I'm Tanya.
And my name is Robert Schwenkler.
And get ready to have your mind blown and your world rocked. Hey, everybody. Are you ready for this episode? Didn't you just travel in, Robert? You're in a new place now.
I did. I'm in a new place. I flew out to California.
Excellent. Okay, cool. So we're catching you just as you arrived, and here we are.
Just as I arrive, underslept and ready to talk about our sexual education growing up.
Absolutely. Early sexual conditioning is the topic today, and what the heck does that even mean? Well, all of us, even if you had no sex ed from your parents, like, in your house, sex was never talked about, nobody knew about it. It was like some foreign thing that you came across because kids in the playground were talking about it, or you read something or whatever, but nary a word from your parents to what did you have going on with in your life?
Yeah. Well, and what I want to say is that is the sex ed. Not talking about is the sex ed.
Okay. So,
that was how I grew up. I had one talk from my parents when I must have been in about 5th or 6th grade. The only thing that I remember from the conversation is that when a man loves a woman very much, he puts his penis in her vagina.
Wow. Okay.
I had no idea what that meant. I hadn't watched pornos or anything like that at that point. I barely knew what a hard-on was. It's like it meant literally nothing to
Nothing,
me.
right? Yeah. You knew what your penis was at that point? The word? Did they have ever used that word? So they anatomically at least taught you what you had?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that I had some familiarity with the word somehow.
Yeah.
But going to this piece around like an absence of an education is still an education.
Absolutely.
I'm being educated that this is something we don't talk about. I'm being educated that, the way that I internalized it is that my sex is not good. It's not okay. And I need to basically keep it hidden, and it's shameful. Catholic family on both sides. I've worked with a lot of clients who have a religious and oftentimes Catholic background. And then, sexual trauma, not in my family directly, but up both sides of the lineage. And that stuff gets passed down through kind of cellular memory. And, we're going to touch into that topic of cellular memory toward the end of the episode and what we can do to resolve this. But it lives in the body.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, so, my parents, thought they were pretty cool. My mom was Russian. And so different kind of ideas about what you talk about and what you don't versus my uptight dad, American dad, who used to be called Holy John, though no through religion, but just through the fact that he had this, men are men, they do this kind of thing. And that's kind of it. And he never wanted my mom to talk about her past, was very colorful, and he wasn't comfortable with that. So we were raised with kind of, not the silly words that really uncomfortable parents use, like, oh, don't touch your woo-ha, wee-ha, yeah. Like, what the fuck is that? Right?
Yeah.
Some of the words that, parents use for their boy's penis, they can't use the word penis, so they come up with some nonsensical kind of thing, which then is a disconnect from everything as well. At least use the clinical terms, so kids know how to talk about their bodies. Yeah. All the way up until, I think it's interesting because parents usually want to have the talk. You always hear about, ooh, did you have the talk? Well, first of all, sex education shouldn't be a talk. It should be a continuous talk. My daughter was 2 when she first started asking questions about babies and things like that. So she and I have had talks from the time she was 2 up until the time now when she's 17, and we're still having conversations that just keep deepening. My parents told me that sex was something people did when they were in love. So when I went out into the world, I was very literal. I'm, on that spectrum somewhere up there and I take things pretty literally especially when I was younger. And so I spent a good portion, at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years of my beginning sex life thinking that an erection was a profound expression of love. Now, we can laugh because it's kind of like, why, if they love me, are they leaving me the next day?
Mm.
That was the, that was the problem there, was that
Mm.
it can be, it can be a sign of devotion. It can be a connection of love. Absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily mean it is.
It also happens that men just get hard-ons
Right. Exactly.
all the time, especially when they're young.
Right. So crazy thing that my parents, kind of gave me that info. Now my daughter called up one day and asked me a question. She goes, "Mama, the cats are mating. How do cats get married?"
Hmm.
And I thought that was interesting because I'd never told her it's something married people do, but she'd heard it somewhere. And I said, "Well, why are you saying that?" She goes, "Well, because they're mating." And I said, "Well, honey, animals can mate. They don't get married. People can have sex without being married." I said, "Married and sex don't go hand in hand necessarily."
Hmm.
But these ideas, right? These
Mhm.
things,
Mhm.
these assumptions, whatever it is we have to do, not understanding your body parts, nobody telling you your body parts. Heck, I don't know how old I was when I didn't realize that I actually peed from a different place. My clitoris wasn't where I peed from, and my urethra wasn't my clitoris.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
lots of confusion.
And then on the side of the spectrum, I worked with one man who, what was the scenario? He pretty much grew up in like a family that was involved in the business of prostitution,
Yeah.
and, was around the whole other side of the spectrum, just
Yeah.
hyper sexualized, and still a lot of, what we're talking about when there's no conversation, there's a lot of dissociation from, I was thinking this when you're talking about parents who can't even, your hoo-ha, and
Yeah. I
it's
can't even say the word. Right.
yeah, and it's like I feel the level of, there was a parent that I saw, I can't remember, just a few weeks ago, and I felt it in my body, the level of dissociation that is happening in them, that they're just transmitting both verbally but also just somatically to their children. But then you've got this other side of dissociation, of hypersexualization, which, if we go by the definition you took on as a little girl, that sex equals love, there's typically not a lot of love or a lot of intimacy
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
in that side of the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, and then hypersexualized, for instance. So a father, he's supposed to, like, the parents decide that the father educates the son, and the father's idea of education is, here's some porn.
Yeah, I've definitely
You
heard
know,
that one.
right? Here's some porn. Go check that out.
Or I've even heard stories of, I'm going to buy you a prostitute to,
Right. When
yeah,
you're 16, 17, 18 years old, we're going to make you a man. So that idea, we're going to make you a man by buying you sex.
yeah.
One family I knew, my client said that basically whenever they were tense or anxious about anything, basically the whole family would yell at them, "Go jack off." So their idea of relieving tension or anything like that was, and they were very open about it from early ages, like, go masturbate. Even before
Mm-hmm.
boys were hit puberty and were ejaculating, they were told to go masturbate.
Yeah.
And so that becomes then, wow, I feel tense, I masturbate.
Yeah.
Like,
Here's what I do to relieve energy,
yeah,
to
right,
relieve like stress or tension.
right.
And then there's the work that we're doing, which is about expanding the male sexual capacity. But when you've been wired your whole life, and the same, and, maybe not the same, but a very similar thing happens to boys with porn, which is obviously super
Yes.
ubiquitous. They don't even need somebody to give them those instructions. It just gets
Right.
wired in from super early on.
Right. And in this day, just so if any parents are happen to be listening, or any men, fathers, mothers, the average age that boys discover porn is 9 years old. That's the average now. And girls are not close behind that. And pornified education is a horrible, disconnected,
Yeah.
violent education. A lot of parents may or may not see. The problem is, if you haven't kept up with porn as a parent, you may still be thinking of old porn. Old school porn, 10, 15, 20 years ago was, people having sex. And it was way more realistic than it is today, when people are in weird contorted positions and double penetration is the norm. And it's way more violent. There's a lot more choking, lots of different things like that. Now, you can find other stuff, but I'm saying if you just clicked into sex and porn, the stuff you're going to find right off the bat, which your kids are finding, is disturbing. in other ways, not just people having sex.
Yeah. And at the
So,
very least, it's pretty much all you go to the web page and you've got a whole
yeah,
menu laid out.
right.
What do I
Hundreds
want to
and
click on
hundreds
right now? Yeah.
down the rabbit hole to more and
Yeah.
weirder and stranger and whatever.
Yeah.
And so understanding, so why do we care about this? Why does it matter of how you educate your children or how you were educated? Well, the thing is, all our early conditioning is input into our subconscious mind. And many people don't know that 97% of their decisions that they make are run by these programs and patterns in our subconscious mind. You're not even in realization of why you made a decision to do that. And so if you're struggling, if you sit down and go, yeah, I'm struggling sexually. I delayed ejaculation, quote unquote premature ejaculation. I can't connect with intimacy. I can only have sex without love. I'm confident and nervous. I don't understand. If you're watching porn, you think your penis needs to be this big or nobody wants it.
For the
Women.
listeners, it's like a
Oh,
foot.
yeah, that's right. We're listening. Yeah, a foot or more,
Yeah.
big. And, women all have to look a certain way and women all want sex this way. And there's a lot of that. Or you don't ever talk about sex. Sex is not something you talk about. You don't make sound, you don't make anything. It's a private thing that you somehow do in secret and shame. So you have these extremes of how these things can be. And they
Yeah.
affect your
And
life.
yeah. And one of the things that certainly resonated with me that a colleague of mine said a couple of years ago is that even if you are not religious, even if you didn't grow up religious, even if you just don't associate with it at all, we live in an extremely puritanical culture like that certainly resonated for me. And it ends up in this kind of polarized, dissociated version of sex that we have in our culture where you've either on one hand you've got a bunch of shame and a bunch of hiding, or you've got a bunch of hypersexualized, still disconnected I don't know, like versions of sex. And there's not really, there are very, very few, if any, honestly, examples of just the kind of conversation we're having right now.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So we're in extremes, especially in the United States. Like you said, puritanical, yet hidden over hypersexualized or not realistic sex. Tons of shame, guilt, and the other way they swing. So if you've had shame and guilt and dissatisfied sex, and you try to learn something, usually you're going to be swung way over to the other side, which is now we're all getting naked together and having sex with everybody and we love without attachment. So if you go to the spiritual side, it's all like sex is awesome, love without attachment, bond, do these things, and then just walk away, which for women, anytime you have sex with a man, even if it's not good sex or consensual sex, even, you have bonding, you have hormones that flood your body that make you want to bond with him. So for women to have casual sex doesn't actually creates a conflict more within them because their hormones are not saying this was casual.
I've spoken to many men for whom there's a real strong analogy, and this is me personally. You know, I've had and will do casual sex, but at the same time, I need to feel
Yeah.
safe and connected, even if it is just a casual scenario.
And yeah, I've gotten calls from men who are like, I think I have, I've got ED. And I'm like, what do you mean? And like, well, I got this really hot woman, but I can't get it up. And I'm like, oh, well, you don't have a problem. Your body's just telling you that you want to connect.
Do you feel connected with her?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right.
I've talked to many men like that.
Absolutely. And so if that's the way you are wired and you want connection, the hot body itself isn't going to be enough for you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And that just connects right back into the education. This other form of education that men get taught, which is that if she's, pretty and has nice tits, and then you should want to fuck her.
Well, if she's a woman, you should want to. If it's 2:00 at night in a bar and you're drunk, everybody's available.
Yeah.
So that always, yeah, it's always about sex. And
but there is that version of like,
yes.
beautiful woman, I should want to fuck that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, like, that's not reality. That's not the reality of how people's nervous systems are wired oftentimes, when what we need actually and want is intimacy and connection.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that understanding that you're early, whether you want it to be there or not, whether you said, well, I was raised Catholic, I was raised with no conversations, I was raised with too many conversations, I was raised with don't get her pregnant, here's a rubber, that was your education as a man, boom, go like that. And, this idea that you should always want it, that you're in a way, almost like predator. Many men are raised to, hey, go get some, son. Yeah, the blah, 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 that whole thing,
Mhm.
that it's a conquest. Um, those messages are with you. And so if you're actually having some issues around sexuality and you're kind of don't understand why, you just keep running into some of the same problems, whether it's connecting love and sex, because sometimes that's difficult, or understanding the difference between love, sex, and intimacy, which are all three different things. Having you think sexual dysfunction when really it's not a physical issue. Like right now,
Yeah.
the numbers are alarming that there are more men under 28 taking Viagra than
Mhm.
men over 45.
Oh, wow.
And that's porn.
Yeah.
A lot of porn makes men dissatisfied with what the real thing for multitude of reasons, and also men are can younger men tend to be more insecure about whether or not they'll get it up, so take the
Yeah.
Viagra.
And incapable of actual connection as well.
Yeah, yeah, so there's lots
Just
of
like you're talking about, yeah.
yeah, lots of reasons around all this stuff, but you can see if you're carrying these, guilt or shame, or you're carrying what you think is sexual dysfunction, a lot of this stuff can be emotional components and cellular components, that cellular
Yep.
somatic inside your
Yep.
body. And I'm touching my body right now. You might wonder where, but hey, you need to watch. um, in your cells, remember every single thing. Your mind is pretty faulty with your memories, but your cells are not.
Yep.
And so programs go into your subconscious mind, they become active in your cells, and then you have physical things that happen because of emotional issues and programs and patterns. And it's easy to say, well, I'm going to go out and get a sexual education. I'm going to read things, I'm going to talk about things, I'm going to do that. That's all in your mind, in the front of your head, in your logic. And you can put all the information you want in your logic center, and none of it takes place in your body.
Yeah.
So this,
And there can, yeah, I want to kind of pad that by saying there can be some use to it.
yeah,
And if you have found yourself still repeating the same patterns despite being able even to see or know what's going on,
yeah,
because that happens for a lot of people. I work with a lot of people who are educated, aware, they know about this stuff, and they're just
absolutely.
watching themselves doing the same thing over again.
Yeah. Why do I keep why do I keep having these encounters sexually when I want something else? Why is it that I'm always focused on performance or learning a new technique, and yet I come away from sex, yeah, I had a great time, I had an ejaculation, but I feel like I'm missing something.
Yep.
These are a lot of the reasons, because regardless of how many people you want to have sex with and whether or not that's a good thing or not a good thing to you is relevant. Are you having the type of connection that you want?
Yeah.
I'm perfectly fine having a casual connection of sex, especially because I know what my hormones are going to feel like when I do it. And I remind myself that this is a temporary experience, especially if the guy's present and he knows how to bring presence. It's very easy to fall in love. That's how I'm wired. And to remind myself that this is not it. But there's also ways for men to help in that container too, and help in that experience. It's great to know how to connect with somebody casually and leave them not in a wounded space, how to connect to somebody on a deep level where you want something to continue, how to bring more intimacy and even deeper connection into your lovemaking so that it's not just orgasm oriented.
A lot of which involves an absence of shame and a capacity for intimacy.
Right? And rewiring those circuits that you were given or learned or programmed from childhood. And talk therapy, sadly, will teach you how to talk about it, which is good, because if you can't talk about it, that's not great. But talk therapy alone, if you've done that and you're like, well, I've done all this and I still carry all this stuff, because talk therapy doesn't change your somatic body, it doesn't change your cellular memory, and it doesn't change the neural pathways of your programming. That actually requires different types of practices and work, which is what we specialize in
Yeah.
when we're doing our men's work.
Yeah. And for the guy listening right now who wants something that he can take home and practice, what's one
Yeah.
actionable item we can send him with?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing you want to do is we can't heal, and even if you don't think the word healing applies, we can't change things. We can't heal unless we accept what is. So that sounds like a duh, but so many people are like thinking about past, the future, whatever. The actual acceptance, current acceptance of where you are right now is highly important. So what I would do is I would write that down. I would grab pen and paper and just like write it down. What are the things you're not happy about sexually? Where do you see a pattern continue to show up? What is it you really want in your sex life? And are you living in that experience right now?
Well,
And so,
and this is literally what we have put on our website. Also, this
yeah,
sexual self mastery questionnaire.
checklist, right? Yeah, to find out, like, yeah, do you feel confident enough? Do you have the type of sex you want? Are you able to connect the way you want with somebody else having sex in that way? All those things, how you feel about your physical sexual prowess, all of that.
Yeah.
It's important. And then once you get all that written down, remember, uh, that's a logical, that's an in your mind experience, and it's important. But now, how to translate that into your body is literally start, and this is going to sound like so simple and so not sexy and so not whatever. So you need to know that right now, and still it's incredibly powerful. Is start doing what I call awareness breath. Now, when I teach men how to be able to have, ejaculation separate from orgasm and have orgasms for hours and hours long, this is the first place we all start with anything. So just that makes it more sexy now. So when you're with awareness breath, you're going to set a timer for 5 minutes, and what you're going to do is you're simply going to be aware of the breath coming into your nose, wherever it goes, and out your nose. So you're going to pay attention to the current breath that you're experiencing right now. Turn the timer on for 5 minutes. Just sit, lie down, sit down, doesn't matter. Don't watch TV. Your whole thing is what's experiencing with my breath right now. So it's awareness breath. That is the very beginning stages of starting to connect yourself up completely so that you're not just in your head or just in your body, but you're starting to bring focus and awareness to yourself.
Yeah. And I want to add just a few more words to that to give it a little bit of kind of conceptual framework, because I imagine there might be a guy listening who's like, okay, you want me to breathe and pay attention to my breath. What the hell does that have to do? Like,
Right.
how do you get from there to having extraordinary sex? And
Yeah. So basically, when the key to extraordinary sex, the key to extraordinary orgasms, the key to peak arousal, and the key to having that connection with your partner starts from a place of self-awareness and the ability to be able to integrate your mind and your body, and the ability to feel everything that your body is feeling, and we move from there. Obviously we're not doing that right now, but from there into and I don't use the word control, but the word mastery of your being, the mastery of your sexual energy, the mastery of your orgasm, the mastery of your timing, the mastery of intimacy and connecting. So we have to start somewhere, but the most powerful place we start is at the breath with ourselves, connecting into ourselves so that we learn how to become present and aware, which is the key to all the rest of that stuff.
yeah, and that regardless of whether you came from a extremely closed and shut down and shame ridden sexual background or a hypersexualized background or anywhere in between,
Absolutely.
those are I'm just going to talk about those polar extremes. They're both very disconnected, dissociated experiences still. I'm not in connection with my body and my sensation and my capacity for intimacy. And
Yeah.
so it like this process of coming back to our body is a reclamation of our ability to have these kinds of experiences that you're talking about.
And regulate your nervous system.
Yeah.
So most of our nervous systems are completely deregulated right now, and they're a mess. And so this is a start of regulating your nervous system, which when you regulate your nervous system, you start to have mastery over energy and yourself.
Yes.
So yes, and even if you think let's say you're on this call and you're here and you're like, yeah, I have great sex, I love my sex, but I'm interested in going deeper. This is where we start too. So basically, you walk into my office we're going to start right here.
And it just reminds me of a story that I like to tell about a percussion teacher that I had, back 2012 or so. Extraordinarily accomplished percussionist. This man would just knock your socks off on a drum set. And still, what he taught me and what he would still practice is the
Yeah.
most basic fundamental aspect, literally sitting there with his drumsticks, left hand, right hand, and moving right hand down, 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 tap the drum head up, 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 left hand down, down,
Yeah.
down.
Absolutely.
The most fundamental practice. And this is a man with a high level of mastery, and he is still practicing the basics because that is where mastery is at.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm in mastery of several things and I still practice the basics of those.
Yeah.
Martial arts, same thing. They're going to take you back to the basics, even when you're learning the extraordinary feats. That is
Yep.
true mastery. Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening today. Would love to hear any feedback in the comments, any questions, any thoughts, any insights. Take this practice that Tanya gave you and practice it.
Yeah, and if you want to know more, we are around. You can subscribe to our channel here. You can drop us a comment. You can hunt us down on the internet. And yes, we do private coaching and we teach courses. And so we'd really love to see you. Really love to hear what's going on with you, what you want to accomplish, what you want to change. Just let us know.
Yes. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.